Okay. Oh, just a second here. Good afternoon. Oh, I forgot to do my little thing here. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today is day 4 of Matisse week. We've spent the entire week looking at this incredible artist, this hugely influential artist, and, you know, one of my top 5 of all-time favorite artists, one of the artists that has influenced me the most. So today we're going to be looking at his famous painting, The Green Stripe. This is a portrait of his wife, Amélie, and he did this painting in 1905, and it's just a little bit bigger than this canvas that we're painting on. So it's one of the rare occasions where the painting that I'm usually painting on 9x12 sized canvases, and often we're recreating versions of paintings which are massive paintings. This one is actually relatively close to the same size for a change. So I'm really excited to paint this painting. We'll talk all about the history of this artwork. I think it's an amazing artwork. And so let's get right to it. I just want to let you know, let's actually look at the order of events for today. So we're going to begin by doing the image transfer, showing how to get an outline, which I've provided to you for free, how to get it onto the canvas as quickly as possible. You could sketch it out, but I've got a free resource for you if you would like to use that. And then we're going to apply the Imprimatura, which is our kind of first layer of color onto the canvas. While that's drying, we'll talk about the biography of Matisse. Really, we're going to spend our time talking about today, since we've already talked at length about different periods of his life, is really Fauvism and what Fauvism is, and we're going to look at a couple different Fauvist paintings as well. And then once that's dry, we're going to start the actual painting itself. We're going to maybe do a little bit of underpainting. We'll have to take a look and see how much we actually want to do. And then we're going to start working in the background, go to the foreground, finish the background, finish the foreground, which is what all these steps are. Do our finishing touches here and there, which is going to be relatively minor, and then our side-by-side comparison. And I think we should be able to do this entire painting in about 2 hours. So let's get right to it. So our first step is our image transfer. So let's show how to do that image transfer. So you'll see that there's this free template that I've talked about, and I'll show you where to find that. So let's there's a link to a Dropbox folder in the description below. I think it's one of the first links down there, and you're going to see all of these files. The top files at the very top are for our most beginner artists. All of the beginner resources are at the top, as well as some of the easiest paintings that even a beginner artist can do, including a whole bunch of other Matisse paintings, which we've done earlier this week. Now today, I've considered it maybe a little bit more of a complex painting, so all of these are maybe a little bit more on the more difficult side, some maybe more than others for sure. But if we scroll all the way down here, where are we? Number 115, and we click into this folder, here's the 3 files that we have today. So one of which, or actually there's 2 versions of the outline. One's a JPEG, one's a PDF, and then the original painting itself. So that's how you can download that, and you can print it on your printer at home. I just want to make a couple quick mentions before we actually do the image transfer itself. Here's a private Facebook group just for people like yourself that are watching. I encourage you to join it so you can see when upcoming classes are, and every episode I write, I spend a couple of hours writing a biography, doing a bunch of research, and so that's included here on the website or the Facebook page. As well, it's a fantastic community of people. We've got 266 people as part of this group, people uploading paintings every day, getting feedback from people like yourself. It's a great place to get inspired by other people who might be on the same trajectories. Some people who are just beginning and some people who have had a little bit more experience. So you can become great friends with other people who are on this creative journey. Anyway, let's kind of jump back here to the image transfer. I'm going to play a video, and I'm going to talk over top of it because I've already done my outline here. So I just want to show you how to do that outline. If it plays, okay. So you can see there's the template. I've just printed it off on my inkjet printer here at home. And then I'm taping it down onto this 9x12 canvas board. You can buy canvas board from your dollar store or Amazon. The ones I have in the description below linked to Amazon, I think, are better than the cheap ones you get at the dollar store. And they're only $1 more than the dollar ones at the dollar store. And then you can see I've got some carbon paper underneath here. Make sure the shiny side is down. And then I'm just going to trace over, not every line, but the majority of these lines. And let's just scroll forward because it's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. Oh. And I'm just, before I peel this paper off, it's always a good idea just to double check that there's nothing major missing. Sometimes you forget an eye or an ear or a nose, and oh, maybe there's his signature. So I'm including that at the top there. We'll see. I might have to redo it depending on how dark that area gets with paint. And then you just take that off. I keep these because you never know when you're going to want to use it again. You know, sometimes things don't go so well the first time. So you always have the opportunity to do it again using your template. Okay, and just like that, here we go. Right, nice simple outline. Okay, so let's move on to the next step here. Now that we've got that sorted out, let's talk about the Imprimatura. And maybe just before I go even too much further, I just want to make mention to encourage people to like and subscribe to the channel. See a bunch of people watching. If everyone who was watching right now pressed the like button, we would have a lot more likes on this episode, right? And then just other few different ways that you could support the work that we're doing here as well, including uploading your version to the Facebook page. And if you want to support the channel, there's a few different ways to donate, even as little as $1 through PayPal or by sending a direct message to me, and you can send e-transfer, etc. Okay, so when it comes to the Imprimatura, I just want to also make mention that here's a few different paints. So when I talk about a warm yellow, this is the exact warm yellow that I'm using by this Amsterdam brand of paint. If you hear me talking about a cool cyan, that's what I'm talking about. Now, you don't need to buy this paint. I'm not sponsored by this company. No one's paying me anything except donations I get from people like you. So here's a few other brands that will also do the job, right? Some people already have a set of golden paints, and maybe they just go like, oh, I could do the exact same painting as Michael. I just need to go buy a quinacridone magenta, and then I've completed my set, and I can do exactly what Michael's doing. Let's see. There's golden Liquitex. There's Winsor & Newton. Obviously, you can pause and go back and write any of this stuff down. All of this is in the Dropbox folder as well. Artist Loft, that was Michael's Art Supplies. No affiliation to me. Michael's Art Supplies brand, Peebo Studio, Holbein, and Dyler Rowney, right? Okay, so I'm going to use my paint, and in fact, one of the things that I like to do if I've got extra paint left over at the end of the day of a painting session, if it's not contaminated with other colors, I just scoop it back into these little jars that I've bought. And these are really great for saving you a little bit of money. And I don't know, I always, every time I see paint go down the drain or into a garbage, I just think, oh, the painting that never got a chance to be. Right? So let's save the paint, everybody. Okay, so this is the only time I put water into my acrylic paint, right here at the beginning, because really what we're doing, we're basically staining the canvas, right? And this is, especially for a painting like we're going to do today, we really want it to be as colorful as possible. So this is going to help ensure we got lots of color. It's going to give the painting a nice warm glow that, you know, most people might not know that this color was originally there. Probably most people could care less that this color was there, but it's going to influence every other color that goes on top of it. Unless you put a really thick layer of white all over it, and therefore it will disappear. But you notice sometimes I do put white on there, but I add a little bit of medium, like matte medium, just to thin it out a little bit, because I like having this layer appearing and mixing into our colors. Which goes into this, one of the main theories of Fauvism is this divisionist concept. Divisionism was a sort of, is basically the theory behind pointillism. I know there's a lot of isms here. Pointillism was also kind of like a subdivision of impressionism. And anyway, Matisse was interested in the theory of divisionism, because divisionism was basically, to break it down into like a sentence, is applying two different colors side by side, let's say yellow and blue, and the effect is that the viewer in their minds sees green, right? That those two colors mix inside of your brain, which is, you know, that might sound like, well, that's pretty crazy. What were those guys smoking? But we see this all the time, and we don't think about it. Most posters, magazines, books are printed with tiny little dots. Only 4 colors: magenta, cyan, black, and yellow. And yet those 3 colors, when they're printed side by side, give us billions of different colors. They simulate all those different colors. So basically what, you know, Matisse and the Impressionists were thinking about was what the, you know, the printing press, which at that time was still in black and white, what it would one day do. They were just doing it on canvas. Okay, so now that we've got there are lots of questions in the chat there. Those are like 40 questions already here. Okay, just see if a lot of people saying hello. Pascal says, if we have more than one layer of underpaint, do we need Imprimatura? Okay, good question. Okay, it depends on what you consider an underpainting to be, and that's a whole other thing. The way that I think of underpainting is really just painting some of the lines. So there's 2 different ways to think of underpainting. One way of thinking about underpainting, which usually still comes after the Imprimatura. So usually you apply a color like this, a ground color, on a blank canvas, and then the underpainting is similar to the underdrawing, in which you basically take a color, like a darker color, like maybe in this case you could really use almost anything as long as it's darker than this yellow, and then you would paint out your image. So that usually the underpainting or the underdrawing is about the composition, like just giving the structure. In this case, a face or a portrait, right? Your underpainting could be the vague outlines of a forest or a castle or a horse, right? So that's generally what most people, when they talk about an underpainting, mean. Now, there's some other people who will use underpainting when they say that to mean, you know, you get a bunch of layers, you get a bunch of colors in place, but just sort of big blobs, you know, like areas of solid color perhaps. And then and that's your quote-unquote underpainting, and then the finishing touches are the overpainting. That's one way of thinking about it. So there's, again, all these terms are a little bit different. Different people have different ideas about what that is. So I hope that answers the question. Okay. Yes, Paul says, what sad news for Europe? And Pascal says, yeah, hopefully it doesn't end in World War III. Yeah, so Russia invaded Ukraine, where my family, half of my family comes from. I'm not going to get into it and all the politics today, but suffice to say that that's very alarming. I think I'll do a separate video talking about that because I've been very stressed out about that whole thing over the last 24 hours or so. And I like to think of painting as a way of dealing with the stress in the world. So I kind of like to think of this as like a safe place to just let go. And what's really actually almost kind of a beautiful little irony of we're painting Matisse on this quite ominous day is that Matisse is very famous for a quote in which he said, painting should be like a comfy chair, right? And that, and it's very controversial what he actually meant there. There's people who've written theses, PhD theses, interpreting this very differently. Some interpret that is that painting should be neutral from politics, and that it should be just a place where a person can go and see things and kind of like, I've shut out the rest of the world and I can just focus on this beautiful image. That's what some people say when Matisse says a painting should be like a comfy chair. Other people say almost the exact opposite, that a comfy chair is where people can relax, and when you're relaxing, your thoughts become clear and you can get some insight into things. Like you can, by calming down, you can become more you can make decisive action more clearly, right? So you can see that there's two very different, and so that therefore that the comfy chair would be a place where someone could contemplate politics, so that, you know, that a painting, a museum would be a place where ideas are exchanged and confronted and dealt with. So I'll leave it. I remember it was in art school. I had a pretty intense argument with a teacher about this, who had, you know, who told me basically those two different points of views. Anyway, so let's let's dive into while this is drawing. Speaking of the biography and a little bit about Matisse, let's dive in while this is drawing here, to just looking a little bit more closely at this specific period of Matisse's life. So I know not everyone has watched the other 3 prior episodes to today, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but it's just a quick little summary here. Matisse, born in 1869 and dies in 1954, both, you know, in France. He was born and raised in France and dies in France, but throughout his life he did a lot of traveling, including and last time we talked about how when he was, he originally studied to become a lawyer and gave that up to become an artist in his early 20s. He went back to art school and studied there under a couple of very prominent artists, Bouguereau and Moreau, two very famous artists. Bouguereau, very classical approach to painting. Moreau, also a very classical approach to painting in terms of the technique, but his art was very strange and weird, very hyper-personal. And I compared him to William Blake, the British poet and painter. I think they're very similar in terms of like just their the very eccentric quality to their work that was unlike anything else anybody did really before or after. So I think Moreau plays a big part in Matisse's thinking of like the idea of being an individual and the importance of kind of carving your own path, and really that plays a, I think that probably gave him a lot of comfort when Cubism began, because that's a kind of a major moment in the career of Matisse, as we'll get to here. What else do I want to say? We talked about some of these earlier artworks when he was in school. So Matisse, so we're looking at some of these paintings. Matisse is interested in Impressionism, despite what some of his teachers had said. Colors are getting increasingly more and brighter. Again, he's interested in that divisionist technique where we're applying very contrasting colors side by side so that we create almost like a vibration in the eye and mind of the viewer. And let's see. You could see he's painting many of the same scenes over and over again, trying out different techniques. And right around this time, 1904, is where we start seeing him really fully committing. Remember, you could see he did a number of these paintings of the Seine River, where you could see this kind of very impressionist, pointillist kind of piece here. This painting, Luxury, Calm, and Pleasure, is generally considered to be his first great masterpiece. And then what happens right here? Matisse goes to the south of France and spends the summer with his good friend André Derain. And Derain, another French painter, and Matisse are obsessed with this whole concept of divisionism and really wanting to take it even beyond that and wanting to liberate color from its primary or previous use is to just describe other things. And what if color could be a force of its own, that color could, rather than just it's such a hard concept to kind of to grasp, because that's why you make paintings out of it rather than trying to put it into words, but that you could create similar sort of effects with space that you might use perspective for or values for, that you would use color independently of how it's normally used. So let's say in terms of today's painting, if Matisse had tried to make this painting in the style of his teacher Bouguereau, he would have, used quote-unquote realistic skin tones, right? Would have tried to mix the skin exactly how he quote-unquote saw it, right? As if there is a proper objective way to see things, right? Matisse instead says, like, well, what if I could get a darker side of the face, not by just simply adding a little bit of black into the and adding some value shade to darken that, but what if I instead use a different color completely? What if I use a green? Because when we looked at values in a previous episode, in one of our first 5 intro episodes, we saw that there's different different colors have different value levels, right? So maybe yellow might be one of the most light colors, right? If we convert a painting to black and white, yellow is going to be one of the lighter colors, and blue and green are going to be some of the darker colors. Red would be about in the middle. So Matisse is saying, what if instead I use like blue as a dark value, and I use yellow as a light value, and I use green as one of the darker ones, and red as a mid value, right? Maybe I'm not doing the best way of describing it, but when we start painting this, I think we'll start to see what he was thinking about and how he was trying to do it. And I think the fact that it is a little bit complex to kind of put into words and to describe shows the difficulty of what he was actually going for, right? To try to basically overturn everything that we know about color and how color has been used for thousands of years is a pretty ambitious project, right? So here's a lot of these fauve paintings that he was doing at the time. Let's see. So actually, maybe the reason why I mentioned this. Okay, so let's get back to the story here. So Matisse goes down to the south of France to a small little fishing village called Couloir in summer of 1905. Oops, sorry. So Matisse goes down to this little village, Couloir, in 1905 in the summer to go visit his friend Henri Derain. And Derain is living there, I think, and at least the two of them worked there all summer long, side by side, painting the same things and comparing notes. Like, what if we do this? What if instead I put, like, purple down instead of, like, a black for the shadows cast by the leaves on the ground? What if we put red up into these green trees because it's not really dark, but it looks kind of grayish green, right? What if we paint purple on the trunks of these trees? Because that's also kind of dark, as opposed to using brown and black and gray to do all of those things, right? And it's a very productive summer. They created a lot of artwork during that time, and when Matisse comes back to Paris, where his family is, where his studio is, at the end of the summer of 1905, he makes this portrait of his wife, Amélie, and it's sort of like this is his culmination of everything he did over the course of that summer, and now he's applying it to something very familiar to him, his own wife, right? And, you know, this painting created a lot of controversy. There were people who wrote nasty things about it in the newspapers the moment it was exhibited, ridiculing it. I mean, I think there's some quotes in here. A demented caricature of a portrait. That it was a punishment of his wife. He was punishing his wife by making this portrait. And it led the viewer to see her in a strange and terrible way. Right? And, you know, it's funny because I've made lots of portraits of people, and most of the time people are like, oh, that's cool. Even if there's maybe some creative use of color or shape or doesn't even quite look like them, most people don't get too upset. I think back then, though, this was a really extremely radical portrait. And I can understand, I suppose, why some people would have found it maybe offensive. Did Matisse's wife, was she upset by it? I don't think so. Not that I remember reading. I mentioned the other day that there's this excellent book called this 2-volume set. This is the first book, and here's the second book, the Unknown Matisse, and then Matisse the Master by Hilary Sperling. This says it's $132 to order new. I certainly would not pay that. I'm sure you could find it at a used bookstore for like $8 or $9. And I remember reading these books. I've read them about 3 or 4 times. I think I mentioned before I took them backpacking around, both of them. They're big, thick, heavy textbooks around Europe 10, 15 years ago, and highly recommended. And I'm sure probably in this book it talks about his wife's reaction to that painting. I think, you know, relationships 100 years ago were maybe quite a lot different than they were today, and in terms of especially gender roles, and Matisse was certainly nowhere near the misogynist and troublemaker and philanderer as his arch rival Pablo Picasso, but it wouldn't have surprised me if there was a little bit of some indiscretions there, to put it mildly, on the side. He did have a lot of female models. He really liked painting nude women. So it's possible that there was some of extramarital activity happening, which would certainly have upset his wife, as it would upset anybody. But I'm not exactly sure the story there. I'm sure, again, if you really want to know a much more in-depth version of it, I should reread these books a 5th time. But there's other things that I want to read anyway. So let's get into this painting here. It looks like this is nice and dry. So the next step that we're going to do is to do, again, what I mentioned is our underpainting. And we just talked about there's many different ways of doing an underpainting, or what that could entail. For this version of this particular painting, as an underpainting, I think all I'm going to do is really just do a little bit of outlining around the eyes and nose and mouth. That way, when I get more color starting to build up on this canvas, I won't be so worried about where are the eyes. I've lost them underneath all of this color. So I think I'm going to do that to get started. So let's put some paint on the palette and get going here. Okay, I keep meaning to, I've got to go through these tubes and clean them because they're all jammed up. And I'm not exactly sure if we're going to use every color on here, so I always say just put about as much paint on here as you put toothpaste on your toothbrush. And then if you need more, you can always put more on. And the good thing about doing that is that the paint, when you squeeze it out, is going to be nice and fresh rather than dry and kind of hard to work with, right? So that's why I always put just a little bit of paint out each time. And I don't think I'll put black on here either today. I used black yesterday, or maybe it was the day before. No, it was yesterday, right? Today's all start to bleed into one, don't they? Okay. So now I've got all my paints on here, and again, you can just rewind about 5 minutes where I explained what those actual colors are. So let's just see, because the other thing too is we can decide what our underpainting color will actually be. It doesn't just have to be black. It could be a brown, it could be a red, it could be orange, whatever. So what I'm looking at right now is to think of what is the line, the color that Matisse is applying underneath everything that he's using to draw out the composition? And I don't know about you, but it does look like it's a blue. It looks kind of like a warm blue or ultramarine blue. You can see little bits of it underneath all of this. Right, so that's what we would, that's what I call the underpainting. Right, so we see all of that underneath there. So let's back that out and let's trying to think of what size of brush I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a fairly small brush. You know, it's a little bit smaller than my fingernail. About a quarter the size of my fingernail. I'm actually going to take a little bit of white, and I'm going to mix my warm blue into this color. That's because I've put this warm yellow down, and if I paint this warm blue directly over top of it, it's going to get really dark. It will look like an extremely dark blue, right? And I want it to be a little bit lighter, kind of a little bit more of that kind of baby blue kind of look. And let's make sure we're in focus. And then let's put these side by side. Okay, so we don't need to go over every line. In fact, we could just do like the eyebrows. And it looks almost like actually he's got this, did the same thing down here. Now, again, when I talk about this underpainting, it's what's most likely happened here is he probably didn't have any pencil lines. He probably just went directly onto the canvas, and the canvas was, I think, a little bit lighter than this. Was a little bit more of like a unbleached titanium color, so kind of like a sandy brown or eggshell brown, I guess. And he would have just painted these lines directly onto the canvas itself. That's my suspicion. And then after that, he would build up colors over top of it. So I'm actually, now that I'm starting to paint this, I start feeling like, you know what? I think I'm gonna do like basically kind of recreating his underpainting here. I wasn't planning on, I was just planning on doing a few lines on the face, but since I see some of these just coming through in all sorts of other places, including maybe even over here, I feel a little bit inspired to... I got a little bit extra room at the top of my canvas, so I'm just going to divide that there. This is the bottom corner here. And you can be really loose with the way that you do this. You don't have to think about making it perfect Because this is, you know, Matisse would often hold his paintbrush quite far away like this. Like there's the tip of the brush, here's my hand. You know, that's like, what, 8 or so inches away. So he liked that kind of freedom that comes with holding the brush a little bit further, because it kind of also might introduce a few little mistakes possibly, and those are exciting for an artist like Matisse, not to be feared. Okay, so what's also interesting is our underpainting right now. This is probably the lightest underpainting that I've ever done. Usually the underpainting is a little bit darker, but because Matisse is really kind of going for pretty amped up saturated colors, this kind of feels like it makes a lot more sense for me personally. Happy birthday, Lolly. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, there's lots of concern in the chat there for what's going on in the world. And people, Sandra saying, sorry to hear about your family, Michael. Glad to hear you. We have our community here to be our comfy chair. Yeah. Thank you. Definitely. This is my respite from the rest of the world. So okay. So let's look at the next step here. So typically, now that we've got an underpainting done, we're going to work on the background. So that we do the background, then we're going to do the foreground, which in this case is the face of Madame Matisse. And then once we get that established, then we'll finish the background. If it needs any finishing at all, potentially we'll finish that up in just a few minutes here, and then finish the foreground. That's usually the process that artists use throughout the centuries. We have talked about how sometimes with abstract painting, you don't have the typical foreground-background relationship, so in some ways it doesn't really matter which one you do first. The way I just think about it is you generally, if there's something, you want a nice sharp edge, you generally want to sort of just overlap those color slightly. That way, you know, you'll have a solid color with a solid color right next to it. If you paint them kind of a little bit side to side, you might have a gap. And it's funny that I didn't think about, but Matisse is one of the few artists at this time who allows for a little bit of that gap, actually. And you'll see this even, let's say, in today's painting, where he allows these little gaps of paint to show through. Like we have no problem here seeing the underpainting in this painting, right? We see places where colors don't bunch up next to one another. And that was, again, like very radical. This is the kind of thing that when some of the old guard of artists, when they saw this type of painting, would have said, this is an unfinished painting. Like, there's literally gaps in here. I can see the canvas. This guy's crazy. He's a fraud. He's trying to pass this painting off as a finished painting. Are you serious? Right? That was the reaction from the old guard of artists at the time. They just were like, I mean, it would be like a car without seatbelts or wheels on it. You know, when you bought a car and it comes on, you're like, how am I supposed to drive this home? This is ridiculous. Is this a joke? Right? That's the way they saw a painting like this. And again, it's almost impossible for us to even imagine what that was like 100 years later. So let's get some color into the background. How about we just start? I kind of usually like working kind of, you know, top left to bottom right. That way I'm not getting my hand all over the canvas as I paint. So to get this magenta color, I'm wondering if we could paint that direct. I think I might add a little bit of white into my magenta. We might do a couple of quick coats here. Because if let's just see. If I paint my magenta, which is my cold red, and I paint this on top of here, what I end up getting is a bit more of a orange color, right? Because like divisionism, right? Basically the colors mixing in our brain. I haven't painted orange. I painted this red, but since it's on top of a yellow background, it appears to be orange, right? So let's take some white instead. Do like what we did down here. I'm going to mix this in, and that white's just going to help block out a little bit of the yellow. Right, and I also want to try to apply this in a way that I want to be mindful of these edges and try to allow a little bit more color to show through, and that's pretty hard to do. It's like, it's, you know, so I'm deliberately going to allow for maybe a little bit of this yellow in this case to kind of come through a little bit, right? It's like it's you kind of just want to continue. So I'm gonna leave it like that, little bits of yellow coming through, right? Not what we see in many paintings prior to this, but that's what happens after. Now I think I'll let that dry, and then I'm gonna put some actual magenta without white in there later. So let's just leave that. Now down here we have an orange. Now I could try painting this magenta right there, and I think that would be fine, but instead what I want to do, I want to try to mix this, also because it's a beginner's painting class and it's good for us to learn all this stuff. And I want this to be in the background, right? I want my cool colors to be in the background. So I'm taking my cool yellow and my cool red. I'm gonna mix these together to get a cool orange. That's maybe a little bit more peachy than I would like because there's some of the white in there. So we'll paint this. Yeah, it's and that white will block a little bit of color out. And then afterwards we'll mix this again without the white, and we'll get a little bit closer to the color we want. So similarly, this color's not too far off what I see here, so I'm just going to take this color right now. Now this is a little bit more pink. Let's get a bit more of this pinkish color, the same color I put up here. I just, for some reason, didn't notice it down here, so I'm just going to paint that in down here. And doing my best to resist the urge to cover everything up. I'm telling you, it's not easy. If you're painting along with me, you know what that's like, just to leave the painting, the yellow coming through here. Now I know some people say, well, there's not yellow coming through here. So yes, again, the canvas he's painting on is probably just the raw canvas, or something that is maybe with a very light wash, certainly not as yellow as this. But I like my yellow. That's some kind of just a feature of my own art over the past few years, so I'm going to stick with it. So that would be the beginning of our background layer. And now I'm going to do the cold green on the other side here. So to do this cold green, I'm going to take my cold blue, and maybe I'll just do this here, and my cold yellow, and let's mix this together. So now we got this nice green, but again, I'm going to add a little bit of white into it just to kill a little bit of that yellow. And we can always add, you know, once it's dry, go back and darken it. And I think we want to try to also get this type of speed of brush stroke in here. Like there's a real, like we're just like almost kind of scratching it onto the surface here. Okay. There we go. So that looks like a very Easter painting, right? We've got these very intense, like pastel-y colors. That's just this first pass on our background layer. Once this dries, we can manipulate these colors a little bit more. So, okay. So, let's move to the next phase here. Now we're going to work on the portrait in the center. We already did a little bit of her clothes in the foreground, just because we had that same color on our brush. But now we're going to work on her hair and her skin tones and maybe a little bit, you know, obviously her neck and collar. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do, since I've already got a little bit of this blue that we used for our underpainting here, this warm blue, I'm going to take some more of that, and I'm going to paint that in her hair, just with less white in it. All right, so maybe I'll use a little bit of white. I'm going to go a little bit of darker, right? And you'll also see how much darker this appears now that I paint this on top of that yellow. All right. So let that sit like this. I'm also going to be able to get much more darker colors, or kind of a nice, better blue than I was able to before. Like when I paint those brush strokes over it. Now I just want to get a bit more white up here, just for a little bit more in the hair. Okay. Let's let... Well, actually, I'm just... Now that so I've got my warm blue rather than just wiping it off. Let's go for some of these greens. So now we've got... This color here is a very light green, kind of a grassy green. So let's take some of our warm yellow now. And we've got this blue. It's got a little bit of white on it. So let's just mix this together. That looks a little bit too dark for our purpose. But maybe even before I go too... Let's add a little bit of white. Hey, we're not too far off. Let's add a bit more warm yellow back into this. And let's just test it out. We'll never know exactly if how close we are. So that's okay. It's got a bit of a kind of a grayish color. Well, I'm just going to paint this over here. I'm close, but not quite there yet. But I'm still just building up these layers. Now this actually probably was pretty close to this green back here. So maybe before I go, I'm going to add a little bit more white. This looks like it's just much thinner. Like there's probably a bunch of turpentine or something in his color because he's painting with oil paint. So I'm just going to take my brush. Maybe I'll add a little bit more white. And don't worry about like the paint kind of mixes into your colors as you're painting it. Let that happen. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we'll paint the other half of her face, and really we've got a lot of this painting already established, and we've been painting for about a half hour here, so. And I think it's another, this idea, the Fauvism is also not just the bright colors, but the way the paint is applied is like very expressive, right? You know, again, it follows on the heels of Impressionism, and then Post-Impressionism. You know, that's Van Gogh and Gauguin, and Post-Impressionism is like Impressionism, but with more emotional expression, right? So taking some of the techniques and the color from Impressionism, but Impressionism was maybe a little bit more intellectual. Post-Impressionism is like all of those techniques, but using it in a much more expressive way, like Van Gogh. Fauvism is sort of the, I guess, I've never heard anybody talk about it this way, but sort of kind of like the culmination of Impressionism, where we almost have gotten rid of the more composed intellectual approach to painting that we see in some of the early Impressionist painters like Manet, for instance. And now we're just sort of like launching right into just really, you know, what some people might say a violent brushstroke, right? The speed at which we're applying paint. And then that leads I mean, then one might say the offshoot of this would be expressionism, which it happens around the same time in like places like Germany, where it becomes even more of a like wild painting. And then we would say, then you have abstract expressionism in the United States, Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, Barnett Newman, etc. So nothing ever happens in a vacuum, right? Everything sort of, one little thing happens and then another thing grows out of that. Okay, so let's do this kind of skin tone, even though he's allowed it to get really kind of goopy and like, so these colors right here, in fact, let's zoom in a bit. That is wild. Okay, so this was our cool orange, right? And we could, almost some of these colors are still there, but let's try to go for a bit of a warmer one, right? So let's take our warm yellow, warm red. We'll take a little bit of blue. I'm going to take just some of that paint, even though it's got other colors on it, and just start mixing this into here. A few different versions of this color. Let's do another one that's got a lot more yellow in it. Another one that's got more white in it, right? So you see how I kind of establish a number of different iterations of that same color right on my palette all at once. That way I can kind of move around between them. So I think I'm a little bit in this vicinity. And let's zoom in here. Maybe not quite that far. Oops. Okay, and I really want to try to get this same type of, like, the paint is thick and there's a lot of texture, and he starts painting wet, you know, he's painting wet into wet, and paints are mixing and colors are mixing. That's pretty hard to do with acrylic paint because the paint dries so fast. We could be using a bit of the slow dry medium to help get this effect. But I think I'm just going to start with applying the paint like this. And then I'm just going to go for, you know, again, a color that's a little bit different, right? A little bit more of the pinky version of this color. And mixing it in. Right, let's get a bit more of the, maybe a yellow, white. Version. My goal really is not to make it perfect at this stage, or really at any stage, but I want to try to build up some texture here, because this paint is going to dry quickly. And that way, when I paint other layers over top of it, I'll let some of this stay there. So I think it'll get a little bit more pink later on. Even almost looks like the same kind of colors in these eyes. Okay, let's zoom out. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe, should we go for the greens? Maybe we'll do the green stripe right near the end. That makes sense, right? Okay. Wow, look at everyone here. This Tanya says, I'm finally biting the bullet and painting along tonight. That's awesome. Donna says, don't forget to paint the like button. I mean, it's funny, like I said, I asked people to hit the like button, and all of a sudden there was like 15 likes all of a sudden appeared there, right? You know, it's one of those things that it drives, you know, before I had a YouTube channel, I mean, I had a YouTube channel since almost the beginning of YouTube, but before I started really posting videos regularly like this, you know, you'd hear people talk about, oh, hit subscribe, and you're like, oh, it's so annoying. And then, but then you hear people like, it actually kind of works, and I try it, and then all of a sudden, like, I get like 5,000 subscribers over the course of a few months, so. You know, I guess it helps for us to be prompted to do things, right? Okay. So let's move on to the next step here. Oops. So now that we've got we did the background first, or at least a version of it, and then it had a little bit more white in it, just so that our next layer could be a little bit darker and the colors could stay nice and vibrant, because we've got this yellow that is going to affect all of our colors. And then after we did the background, we did the foreground and just sort of, again, put a little bit more white in there just to help make those colors pop a little bit more. Now we're going to go back to the background, and I'm hopefully going to finish it off. There might be a little bit of darker areas that we might do as almost our finishing touch, but we'll see how far we can get. I'm pretty happy with where we are so far. So let's look at maybe, well, I think I am going to use the blow dryer for just a second, just to help as much as fun as it is to paint wet on wet, with acrylic paint, the thing that happens if you paint wet paint into paint that is a little bit wet, it just sort of scrapes that paint off rather than mixes into that paint. It's one of the weird, it's just a chemistry thing. I have known nothing about chemistry. So let's... Okay, so let's put these soups. Come on, side by side. Let's do again. We'll work from the top left and down. So let's take some magenta. I'm actually feeling that this might need to make this a little bit darker, but let's just see. We paint this on here. That's actually really nice, but almost. It almost looks like it could be a little bit more purpley, doesn't it? Now that we've got this on here. So let's take our cool red and take a bit of this cool blue. And whoa, that goes pretty purple pretty quick. So let's take a bit more. And there we go. It's a little bit lighter. Let's take some more white. Alright, so I just want to keep that real brushy quality going on here. So I think I'll let that dry a little bit, and then I'm going to come back with this color that I mixed without the white, and I'll just apply it a little bit over top. Let's just let that dry. She'll just... Okay, now I'm not even going to bother washing my brush, because now I want to go back into this orange with my cool red. So I'm taking my cool yellow and cool red together. Make this orange. That's almost a bit too reddish, so let's take a bit more yellow. And it's really, it's hard just to let it be and just to kind of allow that color. In fact, I might come back here and add a little something to darken that in a bit, in a few places. I'm not sure. Let's just take some cool yellow as well. I'm going to mix this in, painting with the color right on top. Now it's a little bit lighter. Let's get a bit more of this. So I'm just taking some color right out of the tube. I'm just going to mix it back into this color a little bit. We'll see. Let's keep on going ahead. Oh, and there was some down here too. I keep forgetting both of those colors down here. This is my orange that I was just painting with. Going to take a little bit of that color off. Go back here. Maybe that's too much. Let's get a bit of white in here, not too much. Peachy color that we had earlier. Okay. So I'm going to do more here when this dries, but let's move on to this color here. So here's our cool green. That's a little bit too greenish. Let's make it a little bit more blue-green. Take a bit of white, not too much. Very, like, almost like you're trying to paint it in as quickly as humanly possible, and even kind of scraping down to get some of the paint below to be visible. Okay, I'm gonna make a bit of my dark color with this exact color, because we've got warm red, cool blue, and cool yellow are going to make a black. So I'm going to mix this together. And this has also gotten a little bit diluted because of all just the color I was putting in there, so that's pretty good. I do want to paint that, but let's just hold off for a second before I go too much further, because we'll do the foreground here in a minute. Maybe I'm just gonna take this same color. Just give a little bit of nuance. A little bit of a slightly darker color around there. Okay. John says, this painting reminds me of street painting, doesn't it? Like painting on the wall. Like, you mean like graffiti painting? Is that what you mean, John? I mean, I guess, like, the urgency of trying to paint really quickly is, I guess, pretty similar to doing that kind of a painting, right? It's, you know, it's a very different approach. Like, with Matisse, how would you describe, like, classical painting is more like a chess game, like very slow, deliberate, methodical approach to painting. Often you're thinking, like, if you can, multiple steps ahead of where you are, right? You're thinking, okay, I want to make this face this particular color, so I'm going to mix, we're going to have like 4 layers of thin glazes to get that effect. Right, so like a really good chess player is thinking many moves ahead towards the end, right? So classical painting is like chess. This is more like baseball, perhaps. You know, baseball, there's still, you know, a strategy involved, but baseball is a lot more like Very slow. You know, if you ever watch baseball on TV, it can be really slow, and then boom, all of a sudden somebody hits a ball, and everything's people running around, the crowd's cheering, and then slow again. How much longer is this gonna be? Whoa, something else happened. So it's kind of like Matisse, where it's, you know, there's a lot of like, you're looking at it, you get the paint ready, nothing's happening, very slow, and then boom, okay, and then boom, right? It's stop and start, like where you're moving the brush really quickly like this. Okay, so let's get this little bit of a darker color. Remember, I promised I was going to use this. So let's just take this same. This was my cool red with a little bit of warm blue, just to kind of make it a little bit darker. And so I'm just going to apply a little bit of that up here, maybe even a little bit more. Do I want to do that down here at all? I think I'm okay. Okay, it's starting to come into focus now, especially when we get those little bit of nuances in the color. I think that is really, really helpful. Okay. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with the background. I think I'm ready to move on to the next step here, which is the foreground. Our second attempt at the foreground. And yeah, so let's I think we're moving at a really nice speed too, so that's really exciting. Let me just, looks like the clock stopped on my so actually I'm not really sure how long I'm like, wow, we've been at like 1 hour area for a while here. I'm like, yeah, I think it was there we go. Yeah, 1 hour and 20 here. Let's be. Come on. Okay, either way, while that's doing its thing, let me just come back up here. There we go. Okay, so now that we've got the background done, I'm pretty sure I'm done with the background. Let's finish, or get most of the foreground finished. So, where do we want to do next? I think we could probably tackle the hair next. Or, no, I'm just thinking this color right here, because I want to be able to start doing some darker colors. So does this need to be modified? That's not bad. I guess it's a little bit maybe darker here, so I want to have it a bit of kind of a white cool gray. Let's take a bit of my darker color in here just to make it a bit more gray white. I think we want something just a little bit more muted here. Again, maybe not everywhere. Let's take a bit of this. need that anywhere else. I think I'm good with that color. Or maybe just... I might have gone a little bit much on the gray, actually. Or at least that's the way it looks on camera. On mine it looks fine, but that's the weird thing. So how about, yeah, we're going to do the hair. So let's just take some of the ultramarine blue again. And we'll paint this up here. Now you can see, now that I've got a second layer of this, it tends to work a little bit better than that first one, which made it look really dark green. I'm going to do a little bit of modifying here shortly, but let's just get this in. See some, I just noticed there was some brown underneath this. It's not the end of the world, but you know, sometimes you don't notice these things until a little bit later on. So you can see he now that sometimes you just, that's why you have to spend a little bit of time with a painting. Is that, you know, I've been looking at this painting, thinking about it for decades. Here I'm painting it, and now I notice things that I'd never really thought about before. Okay. So before I go too much further, let's get this warm brown in here. Let's take our ultramarine blue, our warm red, and our warm yellow, and we're going to make a brown. Bit of white. I should have noticed this earlier, but anyway. It is what it is. So let's paint. Paint on it. The blue's mixing into that color. I want it to be a little bit more red. It's getting kind of muddy right now. Just looking around, seeing if I can... This is my warm brown. So I'm trying to put it in as like little bits that will eventually get kind of covered up a little bit by other colors. that's, well, should we do, you know, her lips are much more red. So I'm just, without even washing my brush, I'm just going to go right into here, this warm red, with the sort of same brown that's on here. I'm not worried about the shape of these lips or anything yet, because we'll modify all that. Okay. There's so many questions or comments here. Okay, so again, these are going to disappear, and I think that can be a little bit frustrating for a beginner artist when we see kind of big blobs of color like that. They are part of the painting that is, you know, it's like the cheese on the hamburger. We're going to put a bun on top, so, but we need to put the cheese in there somewhere, right? So I just cleaned my brush. Okay. So I'll do probably the dark area in the hair afterwards. Maybe just a little bit of more blue in here. So now let's go back to this skin color, this greenish color. So before we mixed this was here our warm yellow. Maybe let's mix it again. And a little bit of warm blue. Some white. Maybe just much less. I think it's this warm yellow that's the key here. And let's just paint that in. I mean, basically just made the same color, but I'm going to just paint this kind of quickly over top. Get things a little bit wet again. Let's do a pass with a bit more white, and maybe I'll just actually take white without mixing it too much right onto my wet brush. bit too much, so I'll just brush it in a bit more. Wipe it off, go back to my color. Okay. Now let's go for the darker version of this color. So we got this here. Actually, this is what it was before. This is basically just our same thing. We just added maybe a little bit more blue to it. Let's mix it over here. Warm yellow, warm blue. We get this green. Underneath the face here. Okay. I guess I could probably have waited until I did the other side first, but I think let's do that other side. And then we'll come back, because I think we're going to put a little bit of some browns in here. And yeah, I was going to let my paper stay kind of greenish, but let's just clean it there. Okay, so we're going to go back to our warmer colors, right? Here's my warm yellow, warm red. This is where we mixed all these colors in. It's still a little bit wet, which is great. That's our bit more of a yellowy skin tone. Here's our more kind of fleshy, pinky versions. So, you know, I'm just going to take a bunch of colors on here and just start kind of painting them around and see how it looks. That's maybe a little bit darker. Actually, no, not bad. Let's get some where we got a little bit more white. Just really allowing this to get kind of goopy and it's tough to do this kind of thing. That's why this is one of the more advanced ones, right? To kind of just get the amount of white and everything just perfect without over mixing it. Back into my pinkier colors. Okay, I think if I just keep on going, I'm just pushing paint around as they say so. Again with a bit more of an actual orange. Okay, actually now that I got that orange, let's jump back and neglected that area. We'll come back there. Just gonna mix a bit more of a reddish orange here. Needs to be much more red. Go back into her lips with this red. I think that might be good. So let me go back to this green. That's a kind of a yellowish green. A warm yellow green, I mean. Maybe, well, actually that's not bad up there. Maybe just, I don't think it's supposed to be there, but it doesn't look too bad up there. Okay. else here? Let's get some of our darker blue, warm blue green. Let's do this stripe down her middle of her face. So it's this green. Actually, there's a bit of cool green in there as well, but I'm just gonna paint this warm green first. Let's do the other, this kind of very minty, cool green on her face as well. So this is my cool blue with some white and a very small amount of cool yellow. Just gets this a little bit more minty color. Everywhere. I love this color. I want to use it in a bunch of more places, but I guess that's it. Huh. Okay. Actually, speaking of that color, let's do a version of it that's much darker. So we're just going to take our cool blue, a little bit of this same cool green, and there in that eyebrow. I mean, I guess that's a little bit darker. So we could take just a little bit of warm red, and that just makes it a little bit I'm going to take this same dark turquoisey blue. And let's do some of the details down here on her shirt. we've got one. Okay. Now that eyelid looks really high. Right, so her eye looked like really wide open, so I'm just closing it down a little bit by getting it closer to the iris. Okay. Okay, so we're doing pretty good here. I think it's, we're at our finishing touches part of this painting. We don't have that much left to do. We're just doing maybe a little bit more of the warmer blue on this side of the painting. Some dark, warm blue in the hair. And then maybe just a little bit of finessing here and there. So let's get to our finishing touches. Maybe just as a, yeah, let's show these side by side again. So I think we should mix our dark color again, our darkest color. So to do that, we're going to need warm red, cool yellow, and cool blue. Again, we could use black. I don't think he used black in this painting. Maybe in about 3 places, you know, that could be black right there, maybe a bit mixed in here, maybe there, but that also looks like it's like a really dark Prussian blue. Even these eyes, those look more blue than black. So anyway, let's mix our darkest color. We've got here our cool blue, cool yellow, and warm red. So this together, they're going to make a really nice dark color. Doesn't matter which order you mix them in, because you often kind of find you need to kind of play with the ratios a little bit. Right now that looks kind of brownish, and that probably tells me that there's, you know, a lot of red and yellow together. So we put a little bit more blue back in here. I did put a lot of red or yellow to get started. Okay, there we go. Really nice dark color that we don't have anywhere else in this painting quite yet. So maybe let's do the hair, I guess, first. Now, I actually quite like this. This reminds me a lot of the way Edvard Munch painted, the fellow who did the Scream. Now, just like the rest of this painting, I want to be careful I don't just overpaint. I don't want to make everything just all dark. I want to preserve all of this work that we put into these colors. Okay, maybe before I go too much further, I'm going to take this same color and take my warm blue just to kind of modify this a little bit so that we're not, again, just using the same color everywhere. Now we've got this darker warm blue. I think I'll reserve a little. I want to come maybe back with a little bit of warm blue without all this paint on it a little bit. So that's, I like that, what we've done. Actually, maybe just want a bit of her temple to come in a bit. Okay. So now we can take this same dark color, maybe with a little bit of this warm blue. Again, I like this look. Now I just made it a brown. Not bad, but I think I wanted it to be warm blue. I was just trying to cheat and use up the rest of my paint here. So okay, just wipe that off. So again, starting with my darkest color, let's go in here, get a bit of this warm blue in there. And then I'm going to go to a smaller brush, just because now we're getting into the final details, right? It's the final details. Da da dun dun da da dun dun dun. Let's get this up here. Before I go too much further, I want to turn this into a bit more of a green. So I'm taking some of my my warm yellow. Just gonna mix this into the same color a little bit. So I got my warm blue. I'm just gonna lighten it up a little bit, but just go back to my yellow. Go back to the little bit darker green that I had there. Let's get this dark chin. I'm going to put some more warm red on these lips. And then let's add a bit of white in there. There's this real kind of dirty color here. What color is that? A little bit of white. I've neglected to get that. Okay, so let's zoom out and just see how close we are. I think I need to just clarify a little bit in the... Also bring her cheek up a little bit. This is a little bit round of a cheek, and you can see he was doing the same kind of thing right there. So let's get this warm blue with a little bit of green in there. thing here. What else is of... What else am I missing? I mean, I want to... Yeah, we're going to go over that in a minute. I guess on this side, a little bit more of a slightly dirty green. Okay, let's do our green stripe again. Warm blue, cool yellow. Let me get more. Sorry, warm blue and warm yellow. There's a bit of white in there too. It's a little bit too much white. And now I see some purple in here. I mean, you know, that's the thing. When you start doing this, you start seeing more and more colors appearing, right? Dark green. It's again same color I've been using for a bunch of places. I'm going to kind of outline this ear. That could actually be much darker, shouldn't it? Let's just take our dark color right on here. So now I'm just taking my darkest color, right? Warm red, cool blue, cool yellow. What happened there? What color is that come off my brush? Okay, and then I've been wanting to do this blue up here for a bit. Okay. Do I want to do that purple? Let's just see. Let's get... I'm taking my darkest color again. And I just want to go into... these eyes. Maybe I will just do a little quick purple. Do I have any purple left? Take some of my warm blue, magenta, mix that together. It needs to be much more bluish. Let's get a bit of white. You can't see what I'm doing, can you? There you are. Didn't like that last brush stroke, so let's see if I can just wipe it away. There we go. I might be done. What about a little bit of white? There's my out of white. Maybe I'll just leave that. Okay. So, I think we're ready to do our side-by-side comparison after about an hour and 30 or so of painting. Let's take a look. Maybe just quickly before we do that, just reminding everyone to hit the like, subscribe button, notification bell so that you know when new videos are coming. Join the Facebook page, upload your version of today's painting to the Facebook page so that in a couple of weeks we can take a look and celebrate them. And if you found this helpful at all, consider a small donation. That helps keep all of this going. All of these cameras, all of that's from your generosity that has helped keep this whole enterprise going for the last couple of years. So thank you everyone once again. Okay, so with our final comparison side by side of these paintings, I'm pretty happy. You know, I didn't quite capture the same really gooiness that he had, but I think that's also a feature of the oil paint, right? The oil paint allows us to continue to mix paint long after it's been applied to the canvas. And Matisse was known as someone that would like constantly work the, you know, try to keep the painting open for a long period of time. So I think in terms of using acrylic paint, we got pretty close to the original. And we have that same kind of, you know, not all the brush strokes are going the same way, but it's about trying to capture that same feeling and approach to painting here. I'm pretty satisfied with the way that looks. Let's just zip in, oops, to, oh, where did that go? Okay, whoa. I delete that. Where's everything's okay, somehow deleted that into the trash. There we go. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad for a few hours work, right? Okay. So, that brings us to the end of another painting session. So, thank you everyone for painting along with me. I would love to see what you created and how it turned out. And again, in a couple of weeks, we're going to take a look at everything you've been able to do. On Saturday, and I'm not exactly sure what time, it could be at 2 or it could be much later. I might even have a special guest, potentially. I don't know. So you want to hit that notification bell and join the Facebook group so you don't miss it. We're actually going to be making the painting that's on the front of this book. We're going to be doing this as a cutout as well as a regular painting. So join us for that. I'm super excited to put the finishing touches on our Matisse week. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you guys in a couple of days. Enjoy your time. Until then, everybody, good night.